Thanks so much, Bethany. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for coming to learn a little bit and talk a little bit and collaborate a little bit, thinking about digital learning and digital best practice as we go into this very interesting school year filled with lots of changes. I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds as I share my screen here. And let's see. There we go. All right. So I just wanted to share with you and give you a couple of moments to do some investigating and get yourself situated as we go on this thinking adventure. Grab a piece of paper or some scratch paper. We'll do some writing as we go today. But I want you to start just looking at this image and doing a close reading of it. What do you notice? Right? What do you wonder? What might it be? What do you see that makes you say that? And feel free to jot on paper, or feel free to post some thinking in the chat. What do you notice? What do you wonder? What could it be? And we'll come back to some conversation with paper stuff too. One of the things that I've been looking into, and my writing partner Katie and I have been really thinking a lot about, is this entry to Zoom, right? Instead of having students just sit there and wait for everybody to get to the meeting, or have that downtime maybe of like organization and whatnot. A lot of times we try to welcome students to the Zoom meeting with some image study, a short video clip to watch, a graphic, excuse me, to unpack, and to have something to do as they go, right? So anytime we ask kids to write in the chat, they're producing new writing, right? We think about this as sneaky writing if they were able to say like 2 sentences. And then maybe we have 2 sentences in the chat later, like that adds up quickly to a paragraph of writing. It's also an opportunity to employ many of those comprehension strategies that we use in reading, inference, visualization, determining the most important information in a visual piece of text, right? We can ask questions about it. All of these strategies that we use to become terrific readers. And of course, as we become terrific readers, we can access all different content areas. So I'm just gonna pop out for a second so I can take a peek at the chat here. Yeah, good job. The vivid blue of the background, right? Absolutely. So when we take a look at this, we can start doing some of these thinking pieces, and then we can like have a reveal with students, right? So what is it? It's a jellyfish. I bet you guessed that one. But just here's like the quick how-to of it, right? There's a website that is a teacher website. It's actually not for teachers, but it's one that teachers we would recommend, students not recommend. But it's called Unsplash, and it's professional photographers that have shared their work for free with some attribution, but it's really beautiful photos of just about anything you could imagine in the world. That's why it's more of a teacher's site, because you can, look up things that might have a little bit more mature content, but it's a great place to go and find images to pull for like some of this wondering or this image study. When you go into Google Slides, for example, you just double click on your photo and these little black edges come up on that photo, and that's how you can zoom in and adjust it so that we could see the image that we saw right there, right? We could scale it to fit. If you're using a tool like a Mac and Keynote, Mac, you can just resize the image as well and zoom in. So this is a strategy we use to engage students right as we get started with our time together. So thinking about about some of those engagement pieces, I'm going to stop for a second and I'm going to ask the people on this call just to give me a little feedback in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, as to what your school setup looks like right now. Are you fully remote? Are you a mix of at home and in person? Are you on some type of hybrid model, or are you face-to-face? I've been working with districts around the country. I was sharing with Jen just a little bit ago, and everyone has a very own and unique plan. So I don't want to assume that I know what you all are doing, but just to like really personalize it for what you might need, because I've spent a ton of time this summer thinking about schedules and rollouts and content. Okay, so it looks like fully remote for 2 more weeks and then back with 50%. Okay, so this is great. We can like tailor our conversation a little bit to look like what a hybrid model could look like as well, and share some thoughts and ideas for that, because that's what I've been thinking about a lot. And if I have some resources that might work for you too, all the better, because then you can use them. I think it's important to note, and we talked about this before if you were here in June, that what we did this spring wasn't distance learning or remote learning or virtual learning. It was really just emergency teaching, right? We didn't have a lot of time. We had minimal, if any, plans for what this would look like. And we tried a bunch of things in order to try to find something that worked for students. Now, we learned a lot from that experience. We spent an entire summer planning. We've got some great tools and ideas that we can implement and leverage. And there's also going to be some things we move away from, right? So we're going to take all the learning that we had from the spring, plus good planning, and an open mindset as we transition into a place possible for what this school year could look like. It might be like this, where you have students in front of you for part of the day or all of the day. It might also spend a lot of time looking like this, where we're working and thinking with students online. And I think that, you know, there are a couple key strategies that we can use to make it even more effective. So much of our good teaching can happen with paper. So much of our good teaching can happen from reading something to students and sending them some articles or giving them content via links. It doesn't all have to be technology. And I think that's a really important piece to remember, is that strive for balance, because I know our brains are thinking so much technology because we now have it, and we know this remote piece, and we didn't know that before. And so just like, you know, when kids learn a new strategy in sports or in literacy or in math, they often over apply the rules, right? I think about like young writers, when they put a period after every single word, they know about periods and they're over applying it. As adults, we do the same thing without even really realizing it. And so just because we have the technology doesn't mean it's the only way we teach. And while we're remote, we're actively seeking ways to incorporate and to engage other modalities as well. So we're really thinking about a couple of those key pieces. I think we're also looking to be selective about the technology that we use, and whether our environment is remote, hybrid, face-to-face, whether it changes 2 times in the year or more. I think what's so important to keep on the front of our brains is this idea that it's not the technology, it's the teaching. And we know teaching, right? Like, we got that. We already know how to be great teachers. We're just shifting the delivery system in some ways. And so we're falling back on all that rich knowledge of best practice and strategies that have been research-based and teacher tested and kid approved. And we're saying, okay, we've got these things. Now, what would that look like through a lens of technology? Or how is another way I can go about that same piece and really get to the heart of what we need to do with our students, right? So we're thinking about it. It's about the teaching. We know the teaching, fall back on the teaching. And so for me, I start every talk just talking about the research that I believe in and that impacts my life and that guides all my decisions. And of course, David Pearson's work on active learning, where Pearson and Associates really identified that for a lot of schoolwork, learning can be passive for students, and where we know that the learning and the memory and the reuse of information occurs is when we make it more active. And so we're constantly inviting students to use the chat as an opportunity for turn and talk. We're asking them to draw and write their thinking, hold it up to the screen so we can see, right? All of these ways where we can make learning more active. And in doing so, we're naturally differentiating. And I think about it a lot like origami. We're just folding in one more entry point to the information, one more access for us to find a way to reach kids and to connect with kids. The other big piece I'm thinking about all the time is Richard Allington's work on reading achievement. And Allington really just pared it down, and it's been tested and tested and tested upon. 3 things to build strong readers: volume, the more you read, the better reader you become; choice in the texts and titles that you read; choice amplifies engagement and motivation. And so we know if kids have choice over what they read, they can actually surpass their independent reading level by up to 2 levels. And then the third thing is explicit instruction. We need to teach students what they need to do in order to be terrific readers, terrific thinkers, terrific citizens, right? I think we take those same 3 things and think about it with tech. We need to use the tech a lot in order to be good at it. I think we're going to have an opportunity to really grow in that area this year. We need choice over the process as students, right? Like it's not just the way that my brain goes about this process and I say, first you do this, then you do this, but it's also about helping students identify and determine their process, because we want them to be independent thinkers and autonomous learners and able to adjust when they need to. So it's this piece of choice. How am I going to go about it? And also, what am I going to make to show what I know? You know, like, not everything has to end in a diorama, right? But we can have a bunch of different ways that kids could make a diorama, or they could make a movie, or they could write a paper, or they could make a podcast to show what they've learned during a period of time. And then they need instruction. And I think this is the most important part. And I think this is something we need to be really mindful of this year, because we know as we feel the urgency and the pressure of time slipping through our fingers as educators, sometimes we accidentally leap over things and forget to teach what we want students to do. And if we do that, we need to sort of adjust and say, oh wait, are my students leaving smile faces in the Zoom chat? Okay, well, did I teach them what I want them to leave instead? You know, are they leaving too many? Are they leaving too many emoji in other formats as well? Okay, where can we compromise? Can we just say in our class, we have a 3 emoji limit. All emojis need to be appropriate for school, right? Like no poop emoji, right? But we like make some guidance and craft a path where kids can be successful and independent, and they can be successful and have fun, and they can learn and keep wanting to come back in these conditions that we've co-created together. So we're really thinking about that explicit instruction piece. The other element that I would be remiss to not mention is this work of my mentor, Stephanie Harvey, and strategic learning and the process that our brain goes through as we access and interact with all information, right? We're questioning information in print, in video, in life, online, all over, right? We're inferring, we're thinking about what makes sense. We're just determining what's most important in a video. video or in a book. And ultimately, we're always asking kids to summarize and synthesize their new thinking. So we're holding on to these pieces. And I would absolutely say, like 9 times out of 10, when students are doing digital work, I'm looking for evidence of these 6 things. Right? Like, what are students showing me? Oh, well, that's an example where they had a conversation with the author and asked a question about a scientific reading that they did, right? Or, oh, we're studying graphs in math. Well, now they're determining the most important information in that graph and unpacking it so that they can make sense of it, right? So when we're thinking about objectives and goals, this is where I'm going to, and this is going to lead how we progress throughout the school year. So I just want to give you a quick moment to do some thinking in the chat. What are some lessons that you typically teach your students? Maybe it's beginning of the year lessons, maybe it's lessons for the first 2 months. Just take some time and maybe see if you can get 3, 4, 5 lessons that you might teach your students. And I'm going to pop out for a second so I can jump into the chat with you. What are some of those typical lessons? I'll do some writing too.
Kristin, would this be like material in my curriculum, like topics, or would this be specific skills or?
You know what, it could be topics or skills. So like one of the things I think I was just thinking about was like at the beginning of the year, we're doing a lot of lessons on what it means to be a community of learners. And this is, you know, who we are as a classroom community. So I'm going to do a lot of lessons on that. I'm also going to do some strategy lessons on like book shopping. Right? So how do I go and find a book that is engaging and that I can read? Another example might be something like we might do a process of writing workshop during ELA time where students are creating and crafting using strategy. We might do word work, right? Or spelling, grammar. Those might be like some typical things. And of course, this varies depending on your grade, right? Dissecting a question. Yeah, Tracy, good one. Your words matter. Station work, right? Absolutely. Growth mindset. And just incidentally, I think like that's the thing that we're teaching this year, right? We're saying, okay, we're growing, we're learning, like so many opportunities to do those social emotional pieces, as well as help kids develop a mindset for endurance and tenacity and resilience, all of those things, self-management. Yep. So I think like what I hope that we can do is for the rest of our time together, just be thinking about like, okay, this is something I'm still going to teach. What is it going to look like in a virtual context or in a remote context or in a blended context? And I think, you know, whether we're back in the classroom in 2 weeks or really thinking about the instruction that we're doing right now, I think that both of all of our instruction can kind of fall under these models of synchronous and asynchronous, right? Synchronous being we're all together, we're on the Zoom call or the Google Meet all together. Asynchronous might be, okay, for the next, 60 minutes, depending on the age or whatever, here's what I want you to do. Right? Go off and do that work, and then we'll come back together maybe at the end of the day for another Zoom call. Or it might be something where some students are synchronous, right? And others are off doing their own work. And that might look like a small group meeting just with 6 or 8 kids. That might also be something where I say, okay, we're all here on the Zoom call right now. I need Bethany and John, stick with me. Everybody else, you can go off and mute your microphone. You can do your work on the floor. You can stand up. You can get your body comfortable. Just make sure I can see you somewhere in your screen in case I have to signal to unmute your microphone and come back together, right? So even just by asking some students to mute, I can have some conferring moments or some small group instruction with students and then signal with a comeback to them as well. Like, okay, we've got, as soon as you turn and see the orange screen, that's all orange, then that's a sign to you to get up, stretch, go get your water. We'll be coming back in the next couple of minutes, right? And I'll put a timer on that orange screen for you. So that's, again, those engagement and movement breaks that we're thinking about with kids. And that's where we move into this piece where we're talking about engaged synchronous and independent synchronous, right? So I think about it many times in comparison or in juxtaposition with a classroom lesson. In my classroom, I would have students scoot their chairs up close or sit on the rug, and we would do that mini lesson, and we'd talk, and we'd turn and talk and say, okay, now for the next little bit, you're gonna go off and practice this type of work, all right? Let me know how it goes. And I send kids off to actually do the work. I think a tendency that we have now that we are on video conference and that we are using more technology is to over talk when we're on these video calls with students, right? Like, when are we crafting the time for them to do the work? And maybe we keep the video call up and running and open so that kids can unmute and say, Ms. Z, wait, I didn't get this. Here's what I'm stuck on, right? And I'm there like I would be in class, and then they can go off and do some more work, right? So we're thinking about that balance, and what we've known from years of research, particularly from Teachers College and Lucy Calkins, is that we fail in the area of giving kids time to practice doing the work. That's always where we cut corners, or our mini lessons become maxi lessons. We need to remember that this is time for kids to go off and work. And maybe I'll say, so in the article that I sent you, I want you to go and just annotate that article. Keep your volume on, but you can mute or turn off your camera for this part. But listen for me, because I'm going to call you back together in the middle, and then we're going to do some more work, right? So we're really being intentional about those mid-workshop sharing moments as well. The other big thing I think we need to think about is not everything has to be on the device. And I kind of hinted at that a little bit earlier. Paper is still a great tool. Your writer's notebook is still a great tool. Your curiosity journal, really important. Print books, digital books. Like, we have more materials than we've ever had in some ways. And we need to be thinking about how we can adjust to create that balance. And I think that balance is so critically important because it is that brain and body break, right? Anytime I say, just take some notes as I'm reading aloud, right? Or just take some notes as we're going about this. Draw, write your thinking. Drawing stimulates both hemispheres of the brain. So we're always saying draw and write, right? It's actually found to be more effective than handwritten notes alone because you're increasing blood flow by getting your artistic side and your linguistic side fueling at the same time. And so we're saying just draw and write your thinking, right? When I move, I have to turn my body to get to my clipboard and my paper. This is a different motor movement that I'm using. So we're thinking about all these ways for breaks. Also, when we're thinking about interaction, the new research shows that something as simple as a click is a moment of interaction, right? So anytime we ask students to type in the chat, maybe we'll ask them to do a poll or even show one of the reactions that video calls often have, right? All of these different things we can use to help them stay focused and to give those much needed physical body breaks as well as eye breaks from a screen, right? So I think maybe mistakenly, some people think that during this time, because it's so important, that we need to be like eyes looking directly at the dot on the computer screen and listening and focused. We do want to focus, but for me, like, focus might look like this. Right? For my students, focus might be like looking off because I need that like break from the visual stimulus in front of me to be like, okay, wait, where's my idea? Okay, right? So we just need to be flexible and I think responsive. Like, I'm looking all the time and saying, what are kids showing that they need, right? How do I know that they're ready to go with some of these pieces? And then I think what we're looking to do with students is really think about a workflow. And I think this idea of a workflow is so beneficial, especially in this asynchronous time, right? So where we might say, okay, so now if you need me, I'll be on Zoom, but I'll be here doing my teacher work. Here's what you're going to do in a step-by-step fashion, and then we'll all come back together at 2 o'clock, right? Something along those lines, but we want to structure it so kids can be successful in their independent time, right? And so I've been thinking a lot this summer about the idea of a workflow and creating almost like a one-stop shopping for where kids need to be when they're doing their work, right? So this is just simple Google Slides. I just put a picture workflow example too, if you happen to be working with young students, or if you have language learners or students with differentiated needs. That picture can also communicate really simply what a child is supposed to do during this work time, right? So here we've got some independent reading. Here's what I want you to do, right? Today, maybe for younger students, some phonics work, and then I would put the link right in here to where they need to go. So instead of separating it out and being like, here are the 8 different things in assignments that you need to do, here's one big assignment, and I'm going to help you get from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 independently, right? So we put the link in there so that it's ready to go for students. As you can see, I click right there and it takes me exactly where I need to go. So one of the strategies that I created, so this is a middle school workflow that I made. And this is for something that we're coming up on this week. It wasn't the first day of school, but we talked a lot about our reading behaviors with print books. Now we're growing our capacity as digital readers. And so today at Independent Reading, these middle school students are going to practice reading digital text, right? Because so frequently when we say, go read the article from National Geographic on whatever, you know, the moon, we're telling them where to go. But if we want them to be really strong digital readers, they need to employ those things of reading a lot, right? Volume and choice. And so here are all kinds of different hyperlinked, right, places students can go to do some choice reading. And here's where I'm hooking them with that element of choice, right? Like, you can read about whatever you want, but here are some sites. And like my sneaky teaching move here is that I want them to be able to know sites that they can go to research, right? What are great sites for middle schoolers seeking more information? And so we're introducing and familiarizing with that. Then they have to practice some video viewing. And my purpose for that is because this year we're going to use a lot of video to teach, right? But instead of just passively like chilling out, eating popcorn, watching the video, we're teaching them how to be thinkers with a video. And I'm going to do a mini lesson on this before they go off. And this is practice time, right?
Hey, Kristin, are you looking at something different? I think we see the seesaw.
Oh man, you know what? I think it didn't share. It stopped sharing. Hold on just a second here. Let me try. Thanks for the interruption there. So sorry. Let's see. Here we go. There you go. So this is what I was talking about with digital choice reading for students, right? So here they're going to go off to all these different sites that are hyperlinked. They can choose whatever they want to read. Day 1, I started with 2 places, right? Then I went up to 3, then 4, then 5, right? Because if we give them too many choices, then they're stuck in just making choices, right? Instead of actually getting into the text that they want to read. So we're planning for that too, right? Here, and their second activity is they're going to watch a video and annotate it with their blank paper at home. And I'm going to just teach them how to make that 2-column chart for things that you learn, things that you wonder from a video, right? Quick instruction on that. Even with our middle schoolers, we're directing them to use Seesaw and asking classrooms to use the free Seesaw for middle school because it's just that fastest place to go to make a video, create a graph, chart something, interact. And so now here they have to go into Seesaw and they have to give a 60-second book talk, but I'm not really worried about how they're going to do that. They can make a video, they can take a picture of their book and annotate it with text and add an audio file as a caption, or all these different ways that they can just show. And that's why we're using Seesaw, even with 8th grade, because it's just so easy. And then maybe another step on the workflow would be a listening center, right? Like think traditional like centers or like a station rotation model. These are almost like our different stations that we're going to, with opportunities for interaction, right? And here I'm going to teach what sketchnoting is. Sketchnoting is that non-linear note-taking, right, where you're drawing, but here they're having to listen really carefully and practice that listening comprehension to create and represent what they're learning about in a podcast out on paper. Right. So in this particular example, right, we've got some tech. We're going to do some online reading. We're going to watch a video, but we're also going to write on paper. Same thing with the podcasting. So we're really trying to think about what are some of these flexible strategies that we're using with students. All right. Questions? Is this making sense? Okay. Cool. All right, so let me share a little bit more with you. Let's see where I want to be right here. Go and do it just like this. Oops. All right. So here we go. Getting a little freezing on my end. Sorry about that. Let's try one more time. There we go. All right. So we talk a little bit about these stations, right? And kind of how I am viewing it is kind of like that station rotation model that someone mentioned in the chat earlier. Will my students be able to move around the room in the same way that we've done in the past? No. But can I create conditions where students have some opportunity to build independence? I have the opportunity to confer with kids. And what might that look like if we're balancing in school and at home learning, right? So I think like in my mind and what we're doing in my school actually right now is that we're starting with a mini lesson in class with students, and we're organizing almost like each row of kids is an instructional grouping, right? So I could stand in front of a row of students who are in a similar grouping, and this could be my conferring, right? I'm just conferring down that row of students, and it's not maybe as good as sitting at a kiddie table with my kids or sitting on the floor, but this is one way that I'm going about and doing it. What I create is some type of workflow like I showed you, like here across the bottom, we've got Flipgrid to make a video, we've got independent reading, some type of computer work, and then of course some type of writing work, right? So while I'm conferring with students, kids can be independently doing some different work as they go. This is how we're doing it with our in-person learners right now. And then we just rotate, right? And everybody gets access to the same type of opportunities throughout the day. One thing that we've actually started instituting is having the teacher in class on Zoom for some of these conferring moments. So 4 different kids will be on Zoom with headphones and a built-in microphone, and the teacher will be on Zoom. And now you can have a real small conversation group without disrupting the other learning that's going on in the classroom, right? And it's also a good way to train students on Zoom should we have to go and do home learning for a lot longer, or Google Meet, whichever tool you're using, right? So that's another way of doing it for some of those in-person pieces. We can also think about where we're meeting with students if we have some in class and some at home at the same time. And so maybe we all get together for a morning meeting or an SEL or a live streamed mini lesson, and then we can shift and adjust so that students in class are going to have some type of workflow, and students at home are going to have some type of workflow, right? So this would work if you have like maybe a morning group and then an afternoon group coming in, or A days and B days of students. So what students will be working on at home is has some parallels, but slightly different, right, than what kids are working on in class. And we just line up that workflow for our home learners and then get into the conferring with our students that are in class, right? So we go through this process, whether it be later in the day or a different time, we switch, right? Students that now come to class on Thursday, Friday have this type of workflow, and students at home have the other type of workflow. But what we're looking to do is really focus on that instructional time and time for kids to do the work. So maybe I will teach a mini lesson with my students that are physically in class. If it's not live streamed, then maybe I can just record it while I'm teaching, and then I'll say, okay, so then for the at-home learners, I'm gonna drop a video into that computer slot, and they're gonna watch me teaching a video during that at-home computer time, right? So we're kind of like multiplying ourselves as the teacher. I'm here in school with some people, I'm on your computer screen with other people at home, but you're still getting mini lessons that are personalized on a consistent basis. So we would have those moments. And then I think if we have friends that are home for the whole home learning time, we have that mini lesson on Zoom, and we're all on Zoom together. And then we just go into some more of those small group pieces, right? So group one, we're all on Zoom. You guys are off working. I'm going to meet with these 4 friends, right? Then we just go through the different groupings, either by muting, unmuting, linking to a new Zoom call, whatever works best for you and your students. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity to think about like how we're creating a workflow to build independence, right? Or like maybe the time in class is teaching and learning and the time at home is all workflow time. It just gives you a lot of options with some structure that is supportive to kids. I know a lot of schools are doing like a half day Wednesday or some type of, to make it equal. We'll do a rotating schedule, Tuesday, Thursday, kids come half day on Wednesday. We have some professional learning time. But now the great thing is anytime kids aren't with us, we started to train them on that workflow. And so we can create something, little video from us in that computer slot, then go off and do your independent work. The other thing I wanted to point out with this workflow is that we can see here that independent reading is always there, right? Like independent reading will always be a part of your workflow. Writing will always be a part of your workflow. And so the adjustments are relatively minimal day to day. The other thing is if you have students that have connectivity issues, maybe lack of devices at home, something where they're not able to access in the same fashion, then they can still do those daily practices, right, of independent reading and writing. And instead of thinking of like a whole afternoon of work for those students, we just have to think of what they're going to do during the 2 digital pieces that they might not have access to, right? So I'm always thinking about how do we like save ourselves so that we can be there for our students. And just this way of like slipping things in and slipping things out makes a lot of sense to me. We do this on Tuesday after school. I make a copy of the workflow. I switch up 1 or 2 things, and then we're ready for our next day of workflow, right? And so when we're thinking about workflow options, we've got a lot of good ones. And the great thing is you only have to think of like 8 to 10 different options that you can plug and play throughout the course of the year, because the majority of our skills go back to some big ideas, right? Strategy work, independent reading, writing, listening and speaking, grammar and spelling, right? Like all of those different things, some digital work too. And then I put like the little hands with the heart right there because like workflow could also be SEL, right? Like what are we asking kids to do for this SEL time? Lots of ways that we can just go back and forth with some of these key practices. So I'm going to pause there and see if anybody has questions or thoughts on that.
I have a question. Do you care to put up that slide that was just up, the one with all the icons?
Yes.
So it also, I guess it's also made me wonder or think about, as a teacher, if I know for, say, maybe in the part of the instruction that's going to be really direct, and maybe I'm in a particular text, I could also tie some of those stations still to interacting with that key text or that key learning. It's not always just separate individual things that are not connected. So I might be doing some grammar or writing, but it's specifically tied to the text we're reading. Or I might be doing some grammar writing tied to a video that we watched. Or I might be thinking about that topic from an SEL kind of personal perspective. Or, I mean, is that kind of how you're thinking about it?
Absolutely. And it just gives us all these opportunities to weave those engagement breaks and those thinking breaks into it too, over a similar text, right? So if we're like lecturing on Romeo and Juliet for 40 minutes on Zoom, that's easy to zone out, right? But if we say, okay, so here's going to be the first 15 minutes, and this is really important. Then you're going to go and do some writing about this. Then I'm going to give you a selection of text to closely read and to pull apart for further understanding. Then there's going to be a video of me that's going to teach you the next part that I want you to look at, right? So it's all related to the same type of things. I was just trying to use different characters for like clarity, because I know visually it's like a lot to understand. But I'm thinking about that too. Like if I'm doing a whole day workflow with students that might be some in class and some at home, I'm going to have independent reading probably 2 times. Right? And now go back to Romeo and Juliet, and now keep going, because this is what grows you as a reader, is your time with text, right? And now maybe for the digital portion of the day, I want you to start retelling Romeo and Juliet in like a tweet format, right? Where you're tweeting back and forth the main character conversations or any of those things, but it's about giving some structure for independence and thinking about engagement as we go with that.
And I love those visuals, because for a student, it becomes this thing that I just recognize. Like, oh, a stack of books. Bam. I know that's where I'm headed. Or I see the little YouTube play button thing. I know what's happening next.
Mm-hmm. And I think
Great
the purpose of it too, Bethany, I think is, we know routines matter so much for students. And so that's why we have like routines and systems in school, because if a child knows what's coming or what I'm going to ask them to do, then they can free up all that brain space that they might be worrying about. What am I supposed to do? What's she going to ask me to do next? What is the end goal? Into, Ms. Z is going to give us a little mini lesson. She's going to preview our workflow. Then we're going to go off into independent time. But Ms. Z will still be there on Zoom if I need to check in or clarify, right? So like some of those structures and those systems and routines really help students, especially in this time where there's a lot of unknowns, right? And it is like that structure with personalization as well, right? Not everybody might be doing we might train kids at the beginning on here's how we do this and here's how we do this. And then we can start differentiating. Or because I have this workflow structure as Google Slides, how easy is it if I make like an A structure and a B structure that's differentiated by reading level, right? So Group A, you're going to be doing this one that has a lot more rigorous language in it or things for you to do. Group B, we're just going to keep practicing these skills because I know volume is where you are. You just need as much volume and time with text as possible. But because it's like this base, then that makes it a little bit easier for us to adjust it as we go. And of course, like it doesn't always have to be icons. It can be words and print. It could be a balance. I was just trying to think about what some of these balance pieces were that would give extra support for students that might need that visual cueing as well. Or instead of, we were going to spend probably some significant time on screen, instead of having to read everything again, to be able to see it and just be like, oh, yep, now I know what I'm supposed to do, right? Just a quick note that we're sort of touching on too is just this idea that with our older students, with our 14 and overs, they still only have about a 50-minute capacity of passive attending, right? So this is why these interaction pieces are so important, and you know, really figuring out ways to get kids to do the work. When we think about the lessons that we're producing in a digital format like this, whether it be a live lesson or something that we're recording, we're following that simple structure of greet, teach, show, do, keep thinking, because we don't want it to be those big, huge, long maxi lessons, right? Like that's not time for kids to do the work. And when they're doing the work, that's when we know if they need that follow-up support where they're asking us, right? So we're compressing it, and we're getting to the essentials, right? Hey, everybody, how's it going? We're still all about building relationships with students, because kids who have a relationship with their teacher, on average, perform about 12% better than students that don't have a relationship with their teacher. And so we're looking to develop that, even if it's a recorded conversation, right? If I'm sending home a video, I'd say, hey, everybody, how's it going? Okay. Remember, I'm going to be online today from 2:45 to 3:15 for office hours. If you need to swing by and chat, please do so. All right, then we move into that teach quickly. Today, I'm going to teach you how to annotate a video. We're going to learn how to do this because this year we're going to be watching a lot of video, but I need you to be thinking about it, and I need you to understand how to pull information from a video so that becomes your new learning. I'm going to show you first, and then you're going to have a chance, right? So we move quickly into that show. Watch me, and then you try, right? And this might be a time where I'm writing on my clipboard. If I'm at home holding it up, I might be making some type of a chart with students for what I want them to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, right? All of this type of work where I'm modeling. I might even be showing them something on my screen and mirroring my screen or using a pointer, right? Google Slides has a pointer feature when you're presenting that will have that little color over what you want them to see. Other good tools would be like Screencastify, where you can make a screen capture of it, or Loom. Lots of different ways to do that show. And then we quickly model the show and say, okay, now it's your turn. You go try, right? And then we give them the technological coaching language that they need to do it effectively. All right, so I want you to go off, do this type of work, press pause in just a second, and I want you to go into your independent reading and really try to apply the strategy that we just worked on, right? Then when you're all done, take a picture. You can take a picture like this, hold it up and press capture on your computer screen, and then turn that in on Google Classroom, Schoology, right? Whatever learning management tool you're using, right? So say, okay, so here's what I want you to do. Press pause and now go do that work. Then I invite kids when they're done to come back and press play and say, you know, thanks for coming back. How'd it go? Okay, remember, this is a strategy we want to apply in all of our reading. So as you go off and do your work this week, remember to XYZ, the teaching point, right? So we're just compressing it and giving them lots of time. But we could do this 5-minute mini lesson face-to-face. We could do it recorded. We could also do 2 more recorded mini lessons that we place into a workflow or assign as some type of homework. So it's all these different ways that we can put ourselves in the learning with students. And when we think about just, you know, a couple ideas for that, if it's a live lesson, we're checking in to start. How's it going? Thumbs up, take a poll, fill out this quick Google form telling me about your mood, right? Remember yesterday how we did X, Y, and Z, we're connecting, right? And these are all of our relationships, connecting to our community of learners, connecting to ourselves, and connecting to the work we're about to do together. So our greet is short and simple, but gets us ready to go. When we think about that teaching, this year it's so important to be more clear than ever before. And I know this is something that I've been working on. Instead of rambling, being like, here's what we're going to do and how, right? Any type of visual, it could be on your screen, it could be chart paper behind you, it could be something that you're holding up. All of these things are very supportive. And then we need to make that link to, so yesterday we did it this way, today we're going to do it this way, and tomorrow I'm going to teach you one more way, so that when you go do your reading work this year, you have 3 really clear ways that you can organize your thinking, right? So we're condensing that teaching point and making it as interactive as possible. We'll model the think aloud is so important. And everything we do behind this screen is modeling, right? So even things like not getting upset when the tech doesn't work, or talking it through with students. Hold on, everybody, I'm just having a little problem here. All right, good, okay, we've got that. Right? Demonstrating things. If you have students that have a variety of devices, or a bring your own device piece, right? We need to model that. Like, we need to show kids who are working on cell phones what it looks like, because it's so different, right? Like, using Google Suite on a cell phone is a very different experience than doing it on a Chromebook. And we want to help them find their tools and start doing some of this work. Now, when we think about like engagement during our instruction, physical engagement is, I'm often just saying to students, if you feel better standing for the next little bit, feel free to stand with me, because I need that body break, right? Grab your clipboard, let's write and stand. And then this is a whole different physical process than me sitting at my table and doing my work. Or I'm even saying things to students like, if it helps you focus when you're reading, you can just set your device to mute and you can turn this way. Right? So like sometimes the visuals are too stimulating. You can just turn around and read, and then just check back every couple of seconds. And when I give you the cue, it's time to come back, right? We already talked about little interactions like the chat features. We can also use, if we have a phone, we could use this as a second device to mirror to our screen, or to use it as a document camera. I'm always like stacking up books and putting my phone in the middle so I can record what's underneath my phone and share that with students. So lots of ways to think about these interaction pieces. And then I think in some ways it's us slowing down and just listening too, right? Like constantly reflecting. How'd that go for you? Do you have any feedback on what we can do to make it better? Like, you guys are smart. What should we do to make this better? Let me know if you have ideas, right? And then in some instances, timers work. And I think like when I think about using timers, maybe for like middle school or high school students, we start and we say, okay, we have 12 minutes just because I want you to have time practicing these 3 new things I'm introducing. But the goal will be, I'll send you off for 45 minutes and then we'll come back together for 10 and you're going to do this type of work independently, right? So we're working them up to the time management that they need in order to get through their learning and do their work. And then we give that as much time as we're able to have a go, right? Go off and do it. Start it right now, then go finish it for homework, right? Bring it back tomorrow. We're going to talk about this. And we have opportunities here to confer and to pull small groups. And I might say something like, can everybody just mute your microphone? Tracy and Tina, can you unmute? And we're going to have a real quick conversation about this, right? Like different ways to do some of those conferring moments with students. And then, of course, that transference, right? As you go off and do your homework tonight, I want you to practice, right? As you're working during your at-home learning time and I'm not there, write down any questions that you have about this, right? And we're reiterating the teaching point. So as you watch a video, make sure your brain is on and you're asking those questions and pulling them out for further research. And doing that in a quick little fashion, thinking about what lessons we might need to teach. Right? Like we started long ago with reading an image. How do we teach that, right? As we're more and more online, we have more web features that kids are going to need to know in order to be able to access the information that they have. And so we're thinking about that, and we're looking for that, and we're making good choices about what we might teach and why. So I'm going to pause right there. I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to unmute because it's a nice small group. If you want to pop them into the chat, feel free to do that as well. Brandy, I have the source and I will send that to John and Bethany for you. It's from Pianta's work, and I will look that up for you and try to find the link to that. Other questions, wonderings? We talked a lot about engagement, right? We talked about this idea of workflows as a way to fuel independence and to save our sanity as well, right? Thinking ahead and being like, here are the 8 things that we're going to do for the first however many weeks, 6 weeks. And then when we come back into school, this is a way that we can keep kids safe, right? They're not up and moving, all of those things. Yeah, and I think, Tracy, relationships are just so important. Getting back to like, this is who we are, right? Like we have to fight for that, especially when we're starting at a distance. And as we come back into the classroom, that is at the core. And I think, in my opinion, takes precedence over some of the academic stuff because we've had that gap of relationships for 6 months now, you know, and we know that our kids are craving this. And we know that when we take time for it, it will just completely help anything that we try to do academically as a next step. Okay. I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a couple ideas to move through with. What I wanted to leave you with is my writing partner Katie and I have a website, and I just dropped that into the chat right there. We've updated it in the last 2 weeks to be prepped and ready for this school year with some new information. We have a whole series on lessons to start the year, which you'll see in the middle of the main page from Heinemann. They published, I think it was 4 of our different lessons, and made those available to teachers to use. I also have right here for you a copy of the middle school workflow that I shared. So it's just going to ask you to make a copy of it in order to open it. But then from that copy, you can adjust it for your students if that's something that is helpful to you as well. And then if you're interested in this type of work, there are a ton of resources on that website. And between both of our books, there's something like 67 lessons for starting the year and pursuing digitally. So hopefully there'll be enough to get you started with that. But thank you so much for your energy for this work. Thank you for being a learner. Thank you for being a brave adventurer. And I wish you all the luck as we head into this school year and keep learning alongside our students. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Kristin, so much. And John has just dropped the evaluation into the chat for folks to just take just a moment and complete that for us and give us your feedback. But Kristin, I think I've also seen you on YouTube, right? Do you have some
Yep.
YouTube videos, and then you're on Facebook and that kind of stuff too?
Yep. YouTube videos we have on lesson and instruction, and all of those YouTube lessons are linked through our website. So if you go, there's a whole video section where you can see some examples of what this looks like. And Katie and I are always sharing on Twitter as well. So lots of good things coming up. We also have a webinar with Heinemann, and Katie and I are having a digital course too. So be looking for all kinds of fun stuff in the next little bit.
Do you sleep? Doing
I
TV.
thought that was 8 o'clock. I know.
How do you do all that, Kristin? No.
We're all tired right now. And I think like that's the big thing that we have to do is protect ourselves and our health going into this year, because we're all, our brains woke us up all summer long thinking, what's it going to be like? How am I going to do this? What's the new system? When are we going to go back? But that's why if we can create some of those like structures for us and for kids, we take so much stress off everybody involved. So I hope that's helpful for you too.
It's super helpful. We're so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you guys. Thanks everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.